I wanted to let you know during the early part of the summer, myself, the elders, and the staff thought that we would try some new things. Part of my job responsibility is to disrupt your equilibrium from time to time so that you don't get into a pattern of sameness. Sometimes we change things just for the sake of changing them, but sometimes we change them because we want to learn something. And for several weeks, we sort of surveyed you guys about some of the changes. We made 5 changes this summer with our worship services. I think the one that was most radical to people was this chair arrangement, right? And we had no idea what people would think, but we felt like, because one of our core values is community, that we wanted to create an environment where there was a sense of that as we worship together, our same God, that there was unity and oneness among us, and that sometimes in a summer season, which can be disjointing, lots of people go on vacation, they're here, they're gone, they're away, that we would have a chance to see one another and to connect with one another as we worshiped God. The feedback that we received was almost 50-50. Some people loved this arrangement, some people hated it, and for a variety of different reasons. And so, as somebody who gives a survey, what you really want is like overwhelming evidence that one side is good or another. You didn't give me that at all. So you said, I love it, I hate it. So here's what you need to know. We're moving towards the end of the summer and all of our experiments that we've done. When we create this arrangement, our building wasn't made to do it in the round, to have our worship in the round. We get rid of 40 to 50 chairs. So in the summertime, we can afford to do that because there's so much flux, but as we move into the fall and more people come back, it becomes problematic for our worship experience for that to be the case. So we're going to be moving back to the way that we had our seats prior to the summer. Some of you love that, some of you guys don't love that. What you need to know is that our elders love it this way. We would love to continue to do it this way. It's just logistically it becomes a problem for us. And we don't want people coming in, especially people who are newer to Grace, and not knowing where to go or not feeling comfortable when our room fills up. So as of next Sunday, when you come in, just for those who need some preparation, the chairs will be back in the rows that we have. So that will be one change back that we will do. Our children also have been with us in the service starting next week. They will go back into their age-appropriate classrooms. Although our playground that we've had in the back there, we're going to try and configure a space here. What we found, especially for families that are newer, that have children that aren't yet comfortable going into their classes, that it's a nice transition for them. And so we want to keep a space for them to feel comfortable and welcomed here in our worship. So our children will be going back. I'm sure many of them will be happy about that, but we have been thankful to have our children in with us for the entire summer. Communion we have had on a weekly basis. We used to do that every month, and the feedback was positive about having communion more regularly. So we are going to have it more regularly. We're not going to do it every week, but it will be more than once a month, we can tell you that. So we will have that as a regular part of our worship experience. In terms of greeting one another, we gave each other a phrase to bless. We said, "The peace of Christ be with you," and the response is, "and also with you." We're going to continue to use that, but if you're in a place where you just feel more comfortable saying hello or greeting somebody, you're more than welcome to greet people in whatever way you want. But we want to keep that as a part of what we do because we're not just saying hello, we're offering blessing. And so we want to pass the peace of Christ. We want from here to go and pass the peace of Christ to everybody that we interact with. So we're going to keep that, but give you the freedom to welcome people as you want. And then the last thing was our services became shorter. The reason that they were a little bit shorter was because with the idea that we had our children in with us for the entire time, we did not want to push our luck. And you know, I have grown to learn that our children did a great job this summer, don't you think, in terms of just being able... And I'm not so sure that they're not better and their attention spans aren't longer than our adults are. plateau. We just maybe hide it a little bit better. Our service will look similar to what it looked like before we entered. I, though, am still going to try some of you guys have no idea, but like when you're putting together a service, there are a lot of different elements, and you want a service to breathe and not be bunched up with a lot of different things. Predominantly, the biggest part of any worship service is the teaching time, which more often than not, I'm the one who's doing it. And one of the things that I wanted to do was challenge myself to go from about 40 minutes, which is the average of when I usually teach, down to 15. Now that's a huge, huge change. Now, I will let you know, some of you realize that I didn't hit 15 this summer, but I got it down to about an average of between 20 and 25 minutes. And it was a good challenge for me because it's actually harder to prepare to speak less than it is to do more. If you're not in the habit of doing that, you wouldn't know that. So realizing that attention spans are as they are, I wanted to really see what I could share in a limited amount of time that would stick with people, because from time to time I'll do these quizzes, right, to ask you to remember last week or the week before, and I'm often met with blank stares, which is a little discouraging when you're preparing. And so I just thought, what if I just give people less, but try to make less more meaningful? And so coming out of the summer, I want to continue to try to do that. There are going to be some weeks where there's just a lot of material that I want to cover, but there are other weeks where I really just want us to try and focus, because my goal is not to give you a lot of information. My goal, as we'll talk about in just a moment, is really the transformation of your life. I want you to walk away with something that you will ruminate and reflect and work on, that will work its way out in your life, and that will result in some kind of life change for you. So I'm going to continue to be challenged in that regard, and I hope that you will be too. I want us to work together so that, not that you come out and say, wow, that was a really great message. To me, it's at this stage of my life, that is an inconsequential statement that you will make to me. I'm always happy if you receive something good out of it, but really what I really, really want is, if you're struggling with anger, to stop being so angry. If you're struggling with sadness, to stop being so sad. If you're struggling with anxiety, that you will stop worrying so much. I want your life, my life, our life, to reflect Christ. That's my chief goal. So however I can get at that, that's what I'm going to try and do. So those are the things that we played around with this summer, what we're trying to fix, and as we move into what is the last week of summer, next week, a lot of those changes will transpire. Thank you for sticking around. Some people probably checked out for the summer because they didn't particularly like those changes. But I think those people who call this their home are willing to try stuff. You know, for 20-some years, that's what we've been doing. We're trying things to see what fits and what doesn't fit. And we're listening to you. We hear what you say. But by and large, on our survey results, most things were split down the middle, which means we have a very diverse community in terms of how we think and how we feel, which I'm happy about, and I hope you are too. So that's that. Let's dive in. This is the last week of our series. We spent the entire summer in the book of... I thought you could get that. Our summer playlist, we've been putting together different songs, because that's what Psalms is. It's the Bible's songbook. We've been putting together different songs from different realms of the Psalter, and we've been introducing to you a way of looking, a way of thinking at these Psalms that perhaps was different for you. Now, getting started, Eli and I spoke about this, but very briefly. I'm letting him choose whatever he wanted to choose, which I'm placing my trust in your hands. But he's going to share with you, and this is what I want you to do. When you hear the song, what I want you to do is not even necessarily identify what the name of the song is or who's singing it, but what is the genre of music. Okay, you think you can do that? Should be pretty simple. So we're going to do like maybe 4-ish. Eli, give us the first song. Let us listen to it for a second. And your job is to identify what genre of music. That was pretty easy, right? Okay, for those of you who know country music, I know country music, but not very much. Could you tell who the author of that song, who the singer? Florida Georgia Line. So some of us knew the kind of music it is. Some of us knew who even sang that song. Okay? All right, so the next song, Eli. You don't even need to hear the music. You hear Okay, you knew that off the bat. That was reggae. Great. Give us another one. Cut us up a little bit.
I can't hear.
Is it not? It's not. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. Let it play for just a moment. It has a little R&B rhythm, but it is jazz. How about one more and then we're done? Now what's this? Which is a little R&B, right? Rhythm and blues. Love that song. Unfortunately, we will say goodbye to that, and thank you, Eli, for helping us out. So those are relatively easy. I mean, maybe we're challenged, and some of us are more familiar with country or reggae or R&B or jazz or rock or pop or whatever kind of music. But normally when we hear a song, we know whether to keep it on the station or to turn the station based on whether we like it or not, right? We know the kind of song. So I thought it would be important for us as we reflect back, because this is the last week, this is kind of what I'm calling remix, that we would think back about the kind of psalms that we read. Now, I wish that there was music that these were put to, and originally there were. We just don't have it. Sometimes when you're reading a psalm, in the little title it will say, this is for soprano singers or something like that, and it'll give you an idea what kind of song. But what I thought I could do is quiz you a little bit as we walk through some of the psalms for you to tell me what kind of psalms these are. Now you could do that with country and reggae and jazz. Let's see if you can do this. Oh, I have fear and trepidation. All right, this was the very first week, and Lorraine and John did sort of a little bit of an interview. And you can see Psalm 103. This is just a piece of it. Let all that I am praise the Lord with my whole heart. I will praise his holy name. Let all that I am praise the Lord. May I never forget the good things he's done for me. This kind of psalm, I'm giving you the answer in the actual verse. What kind of psalm is this? Praise. Psalm of praise. We're doing good. We're off to a great start. This one's a little more difficult. This was Sandra's favorite. This was week 2. Unless the Lord builds a house, the work of the builders is wasted. Unless the Lord protects a city, guarding it with sentries will do no good. Now, the answer isn't in that one. You would have had to have been here or know what kind this is. There are 15 of these. They happen towards the end of the Psalter. This kind of psalm is a song of ascent. I love it over here. Beautiful. My wife bailed me out. These were songs as pilgrims made their way to Jerusalem, to the Holy Hill, to the temple for worship that they would sing. So 15 of these, okay? Psalm of Ascent. Very familiar. Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. You guys know this. I won't read this. This is a psalm of trust. This is where we are relying on our shepherd to lead us to where we need to go, even when we walk through dark valleys, deep, difficult places. Psalm of trust. This is a hard one. This would be like sort of gangster rap or metal. if we were to put this to music. But this is where the author is looking to do damage to the babies of their enemies. Why? Because they did the same thing to their kids. This is an angry psalm. This was Dave Kemp's favorite one. This may or may not tell us a little bit about what's going on in Dave's life. We remember what kind of psalm this is? Imprecatory. Impressive. Psalm 27. This one has twists and turns in it. It does fall into a particular category. Psalm 27, I think this is Chris's favorite psalm. Do not turn your back on me. Do not reject your servant in anger. You have always been my helper. Don't leave me now. Don't abandon me, O God of my salvation. What kind of, this is, by the way, the largest category of all the psalms. It's almost more than a third of all the psalms, and this would be called a psalm of lament. Sad, sad, sad songs. It's interesting that over a third of the 150 psalms that fill the Psalter are sad songs. It tells us something. We'll unpack that in just a minute. All right, we're almost there. Oh, give me back my joy. I think Diane was the one who spoke on this while I was away. Give me back my joy again. You've broken me. Now let me rejoice. Don't keep looking at my sins. Remove the stain of my guilt. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a loyal or right spirit within me. What kind of psalm is this? Anyone? Bueller? Anyone? This is called a penitential psalm. Penance. This is where you've royally messed up and you're asking God to forgive you and help you and cleanse you from your sin. Penitential psalm. Psalm 39. This is the most difficult one. If you get this right, I'll give you a gold star and take you out to lunch. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you and lead me along the path. This is the end part of that psalm, but there's a lot that goes before it. Anybody know this category other than Shandor? Nobody wants to go to lunch? It doesn't fit into any one category. Now, I told you this. This was only a couple weeks back. If you were here in memory, you would remember that this doesn't fit into any one category. This was my favorite. God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. What kind of psalm is this one? They are going to a holy hill called Zion. This is a song of Song of Zion. So, here's what I want to do with the time that remains. I want us to think about all of the psalms that we looked at. And I'm going to briefly go through. I'm going to share a couple of stories with you. And I want to bring home and make personal some of the application. Now, my goal when we started this series certainly was to introduce you to a part of our Bible that is rich and filled with meaning and pathos and life. It's a part of the Scriptures that help us connect to our emotions and feelings probably more than any other part of the Bible. So my goal was, if this was new to you, that you would be introduced to a lot of different kinds of songs in the Bible. But probably greater than that was to introduce you to these songs for the purpose of real life change happening as you engage them. Now, my goal, you need to know every week, not only here, but every day in my own personal life and as I engage you, my goal for you, for us, is that you will be different and you will be better with every passing day. That you will be on a journey towards reflecting the image and likeness of the one that you call Christ, the one that you follow. And if that ceases to happen, then anything else that we're doing just really doesn't matter. Right? So if we're not becoming more loving and kind and patient and gentle and self-controlled in our actions towards one another, if the fruit of God's Spirit isn't being born in our lives, then we need to stop for a moment and say, what is happening in me that I'm not looking more like Christ today than I did yesterday and the day before? Because that's God's goal for you too. Now, in order for transformation to occur, there are two non-negotiable components, okay? I want you to really think about this because half of the two you don't even have to do. The first non-negotiable component that is required for any real change to happen in our lives is that the grace of God has to be at work in you. And this is the part that I can guarantee you is happening all the time, even apart from your understanding of it. God is pursuing you, even if you're not pursuing God. God loves and cares for you beyond your wildest hopes and dreams. And you don't even have to be in a good place for this to happen. God is just crazy about you and wants to be in relationship with you. So the grace of God is always at work in our lives. The second part, which really is our part, is that there has to be an intentional ordering of our lives. Like, we have to not just think this is going to happen, but there has to be an intentional ordering of our lives around the values and practices and relationships that we create and are engaged in where that grace of God can get at us. Do you know that you can block or thwart the grace of God depending on the environment that you create in your life? Did you know that? Or you can facilitate that by creating a condition for God's grace to come in, make its home, and thrive in you. I wished that we couldn't block the grace of God. But we actually have the freedom to do that. And because of that, there are some of us who have called ourselves Christian for years and years and years, but we look almost exactly the same as the day we first made a commitment to Christ. There's very little evidence that our hearts and our lives are changing. And that's problematic. Because if we're walking with the one who has the capacity to change and transform us, we should be being changed and transformed. And if that's not happening, there's a problem that we need to address and look at. We're stuck somehow. Okay? So there are two non-negotiable components to life change and transformation. The first is the grace of God. The second is the intentional ordering of our lives so that that grace can find its home in us. Now, real quickly, with the time that I have that remains, I just want to walk through why it was that I gave you homework every week so that real change could happen. I'm not giving you homework so that if you do it, you will get a gold star from me the next week when you come in and tell me that you did your homework. It has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with you. Homework is to help you. Now, on Sandra's favorite psalm, Psalm 127, which was a song of ascent, I asked you, now this will be interesting, I'm going out on a limb here. There was one piece of homework that I gave you. Unless the Lord builds a house, those who labor, labor in vain, right? That's the psalm. I'm not talking about God putting a deck on the back of your house, right? Or blowing out your kitchen or living room and creating some new interior design. We're talking about what it looks like to either repel or invite the blessing of God into our homes. And I drew on this board this list, and I said, what I want you to do is go home this week, and I want you to, on a piece of paper, write repel and invite, and in the middle draw a line. And I want you to do all of the things that actually repel the blessing of God from coming in and finding its way in your home. In other words, when I am stressed out, I talk down to my children, or I'm angry and I say things that I don't mean. Things that we do that repel the blessing of God from living in our home. And I invited you to go home and really think about that. And then things that invite the blessing of God. That I'm more grateful. I don't focus on the things perhaps that I don't have and obsess about wanting more. What I do is I think about what I do have. I'm grateful for that. And I cultivate gratitude. And gratitude invites the blessing of God. And I ask you to write down On this side of the column, those things that you do that help to invite the blessing of God. Because we can do that. We can invite or repel the blessing of God in our home. And I don't know whether you did that or you didn't do that. You can still do that. Every week you can do this. But what I said was, once you do that, what I want you to do is I want you to find whatever it is that sticks out to you. I want you to circle it, and I want you to give some intentional energy towards changing that with God's help. Now, I don't know whether you did that or didn't do that, but again, there are things that we do that create conditions for God's blessing to live in our homes and in our lives. And there are things that we do that block the blessing. And your homework was to one by one deal with the things that repel God's blessing so that you could live in His favor and become transformed into the image and likeness of His Son. That was homework number one. The next week what I did was I took you to Psalm 23. That was everybody's favorite. It's one that we're very familiar with. And we learned some new things as our Good Shepherd took us to a place where we lived beside still waters, and green pastures took on a different image, right? Those of you who were here, it was where God doesn't lead us into belly-deep alfalfa where we have this lush land that we live in. Life's not like that. It's these little clusters of grass that grow in the desert where God takes us and gives us what we need when we need it. And I invited you, do you remember what practice I invited you to do? Lectio Divina, I asked you to sit with that passage for a week, reading only that, thinking and meditating on those words until you had the reality that you actually were God's really beloved child, a sheep, and that He was your shepherd, caring for you, guiding you, leading you. And then we got to Psalm 139. Search me, O God, and know my heart. See if there's anything inside of me that doesn't belong, and deal with it. Help me to get it out. And I invited you to practice what? Examen. Where you walk through 24 hours of your day and you reflect where you and God were at work in your life, to see in those places where you were sad or where you were happy, where you had a sense of oneness with God or whether you felt disjointed, and to ask God to show you what you needed to see. This is a very important practice in meditation in terms of getting in touch with who you are and what you are about. Because sometimes the chief thing that God is up to in our lives is helping us to see ourselves. We have blind spots. And God wants us to see ourselves as we are, not so that we'll feel bad about it, but so that we can be awakened to what it is that we need to see. Examine. And I think that was the week, Bonnie, that you invited our children to write some psalms of their own. And I think you're going to share just a few of those because that was a practice that we would later do with our adults the following week. But I just wanted Bonnie to share with you some of the things that our children wrote when they were writing their own psalms.
So I need Kaya, I need Miguel, and I need Kelsey, and I need a volunteer that's under 10. Sorry, I lied. Under 11. 11 or under. Is there one other person who would read with me a paragraph? Okay, Josiah, perfect. Okay, so this is how this worked. During the service, there were guided activities for the kids almost every week, and this particular week there were prompts for what it is that they needed to do to write a psalm, and then I compiled them all into one psalm. So Josiah, if you would read the last one. Brielle's going to read the first one. Chelsea's going to read the second one. Taya's going to read the third. No, I'm going to read the third one. Taya's going to read the fourth, and Josiah's going to read the last one. So this is our song to God. So Brielle, you start it.
God, you are the glory. You are amazing, extraordinary, awesome, powerful, mighty Savior, the best and wonderful. You are my space, my peace, my home, my heart, and you are good. In my life, you have given me the courage, helped me feel safe, and kept me healthy, and taken away fear. You've been there with me through crazy situations, took me through tough situations, and brought joy, happiness, and love. You have made me feel special, given me strength to heal when I broke my arm. Love, trust, and glory. You helped me be a better person.
Help me to understand life better, feel special, get better in reading, and stick with you until death. Help me to keep you in mind, learn more about you, keep reading the Bible, and to love and share the word with others. Help me to do hard work, forgive, write hard words, know if I'm bad or not, and remember things.
I struggle with taking back my mom, with talking back to my mom, scoring at basketball, sometimes math, animating, not going to church as much as needed, reading my Bible. I struggle with getting along with and play with others. My math test sleeping, my mouth and my actions learning, putting stuff together, and my life. I trust you are love, honest and real. I trust you are going to keep me safe the rest of my life. I trust you are here watching us, always there with me and always have my back. I trust you are the Son of God and you died on the cross for us. I trust you are brave, courageous, helpful, going to help me not talk back, kind, caring, respectful, helpful, and in my heart.
Those were kids under 11. That's their heart. You guys can have a seat. Thank you, guys.
You know, it's the reason that we're gathered together is not that our children are our future, they're our present. And we can learn from how, like when given an assignment, just to talk with God about how to open your heart and just speak, whether it's something that you're filled with joy or whether you're something that needs repair or that you're working on. It's really, really good stuff, you guys. Thank you. That next week, I invited you guys, as we looked at our Psalm of Lament 27, I invited you and I gave you like an insert where you would walk through 6 steps, and I invited you to write your own sad song. I want to read to you real quickly. This comes from Barry Seaman. I remember he and Deidre and Katinka and I were having dinner one night, and towards the end of dinner, he said to me, "You know what, I took on the assignment this week." I said, "You did?" He said, "Yeah, I actually have it here." And he pulled it out of his back pocket, and it was 2 pages of a sad song that he had wrote. He said, "This was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do because I don't normally deal with these emotions, the sadness." Because he said, most of the time I just look and try to find ways to distract myself or ignore it or move on. And that's what a lot of us do. We stuff it or we distract ourselves. And he couldn't be here today, but he wrote me this that I want to share with you in terms of his approach to writing the psalm. He said, "When it came to the Psalm of Lament and finding how to deal with sadness and grief, I will admit to being one of a mighty struggle for me personally. Usually I will dismiss times of sadness and grief as something you just have to deal with and strike it up to this is life and it's supposed to be this way. I would tend to ignore it, and if I had moments where it entered my mind, I would briefly acknowledge it and push it to the side as quickly as it entered my mind. This was how I handled most loss and grief, especially with the recent losses of both my brother and father-in-law. When Pastor Vincent was speaking of the Psalm of Lament and handed us an outline that could help us in going through the process of facing sadness or grief, I wasn't sure if I would be able to handle this homework assignment. But Vincent's words struck me as the days passed, and one evening I decided that I would face my loss and feeling of sadness and try to use his outline to guide me through some steps that might help me. While completing the 6-step outline, I found that I didn't want to just quickly write down each part and then put it away just so that I could say I had done it. Instead, after completing each part, I would take some time to read out loud what I had written so that I could absorb it and allow my feelings to be what they were. Believe me, this wasn't easy for me, but as I went on to each part, I started to really think about my losses and sadness and feel something instead of just pushing it aside for perhaps or perhaps not for another time. I've kept the outline so that I can refer back to it and to see if there are any parts that I may become better with, such as the part of trust. I'm very grateful that Vincent gave us this guide and that I allowed myself to take the time to go through the steps so it may help me with confronting my sadness and grief, which I fully admit is not easy, especially for me. And that's what I was getting at. Sadness is a very, very difficult emotion and place that we will all experience, and some of us more than others. But the goal for this homework in writing your own sad song was to actually, in God's presence, open it up so that by His grace, you created the condition where He could begin to help transform your sadness into joy. And I want to encourage you to continue to do that, like our children, to write, if that's journaling or whatever, to write out your songs to God. I could tell how hard it was as I read it because much of it was in third person. He was still learning how to open his heart in God's presence. I gave him a gold star because he stretched into a new place that he was really, previously to this point in his life, unwilling and unable to go. And that's what I hope for you and I. Last week, I have two more. Last week, when I talked about the Song of Zion, and I talked about how I had on 4 separate occasions that week, people sit across my desk and talk about the level of anxiety and concern and even panic attacks that they were dealing with. We looked at this psalm where we were reminded that God is our ever-present strength and help in time of trouble. And we used images like refuge and fortress that we would run into and find protection and shelter. And at the end of that, it struck me that there was a very real place of connection in this psalm for all of us, because on a number of areas, there are things in life that are hard. And those hard things will oftentimes well up within us, and we're not sure what to do with it. And so I invited you into a quiet space, 5-10 minutes of solitude and silence, where you could sit and remember that God is your refuge. God is your fortress, your ever-present help, always ready to help you anytime. And then I got this email the following day from Annie Carter. She said, "Thank you for today's message. It got me thinking about something that I wanted to tell you, especially since it sounds like you hear so many stories of fear and worry. And I want to encourage you, especially when it is an opportunity to give God some glory. Before my surgery, I was strangely very calm. I had to purposely think about things that could go wrong, which was totally different than when I had my other hip surgery 11 years ago. This was, of course, before I was baptized. I was really terrified of surgery back then and put it off for far too long, but not this time. You know, it's so easy for me to know all the things that could happen while I am under anesthesia, but this time it was actually an effort to worry, and I felt the Holy Spirit telling me to stop. So I stopped trying to think of things that could go wrong, and I left it in God's hands. Many people prayed for me the Sunday before my surgery, and this only helped to enhance the peace that I felt the day of surgery and to drop the worry that the enemy was sending my way. And I went into surgery with no fear at all. It even surprised me how unworried, if that's a word, I was that day. My healing and recovery was going along very well. She's actually here, with very little unexpected surprise. But today, I realized that the peace I felt was what happens when you go to God for refuge. It seems I may be one of the lucky ones that is able to go to God in His refuge like that and actually feel His peace and protection. It is very real and palpable for those of us that have had the blessing of actually feeling His peace surround us in times of trouble. I pray for our fellowship that more people will actually embrace that promise of refuge and not just think of it as a nice idea that is only for other people. Thank you for showing me another beautiful side of our great God." These are the kinds of things that I'm wanting to happen, that they're not just words on a page, but that is a very present reality when we're going into surgeries, when we're dealing with deep losses, when we're struggling with things in our lives. God is all of the things that we've talked about over this series. The last story that I want to share, I want my friend Joanne Risa to come. This is going to be the last part of the message, and then we'll close our service together. Could you hand me that microphone, Lorraine?
I can have a email you my story. I was like, I thought somebody else was coming up.
It's just you and me. And the Holy Spirit who guides us, and a few of our friends. So, Joanne's story is a little bit different, and she came to me on the Sunday that I was doing the imprecatory psalm, the angry psalm, where we're dealing with a lot of stuff inside of us that we feel, but we're not sure what to do with. And as I was walking out of the sanctuary, she came up to me, as she always does, with her big smile, and she said, I just want to share with you something. And she began to tell me the story that I want her to share with you. Joanne is going to talk with us briefly about a time where she felt really undone. Someone that she loved and trusted really devastated her, and she was filled not with sadness, although there was sadness there, but she was filled with a great deal of anger. And the anger had become toxic on some level and was beginning to not transform her, but deform her. So, Joanne, if you could just talk with us a little bit about what you shared about that time in your life where you just had more anger than you knew what to do with, we would love it.
Okay. At that time, I did not know I was holding anger or anything. I didn't know I was mad. I just knew I was very angry. Very short story. I was with somebody that did and said a lot of horrible things. And at the time, it just crushed my spirit. My spirit was broken. I did not think that I was worthy of anything. And I came to a point in my life that depression set in, and I just wanted God to take me home. And by the grace of God, I had strength, and I walked out. And when I did that, it was a new world, because now I have to make decisions. Decisions were always made for me, so it just got me harder and harder. And I didn't know that I wasn't dealing with it. I just kept going. So.
There's a part of your story, though, that I want to get at so that you can share. I think this part is really important. When I was talking that day about the imprecatory Psalm 137, I was talking about how important it is to pray the hate. In other words, if you're feeling hatred or anger or violence inside of you, I think that the only best person who can deal with that overflow is God. And I think sometimes many of us are raised thinking, well, we can't say that to God. And I said, it's in the Bible. We actually can say that to God. It doesn't feel great when we are. Could you talk about how you navigated the space and learned to just take those feelings and express them in God's presence?
Yeah, during that time, I can remember somebody asking me if I wanted my life to change, and I said yes. And so she prayed this in her prayer with me, and she asked me to pray it. And I didn't know what it was, but I did. And didn't know God was listening, because I didn't know God. Moving forward 10 years, I was doing my quiet time in the morning. Every morning I got up, I had coffee, and I prayed. While I was reading scripture for about 3 days in a row, it was all about forgiveness. No. Because I knew where he was leading me. And I literally can remember telling God, how dare you? How dare you ask me to forgive him? You know exactly what he did, what he said, and I will not. And I didn't. About a week later, I started reading scripture, and it was about me being forgiven. And for me to forgive, I had to forgive. So I was like, all right, fine, I'll pray. And I just said, I'm not doing it. Out of obedience, because I want God to love me, and I know he loves me even through my brokenness, but I want to please him. So I said, because you asked me, I'll just say I forgive him. And I said, that's all I said for weeks. And then it just started, and I was angry. I did not want God to forgive him. Literally, I told him, I said, I want him to burn in hell. He has no right for your love or anybody else's. Well, God took that, and he's like, okay. So I kept on praying, and it took me a good 3 weeks. And I found myself lifting this person up in prayer, and I can remember praying, and for some reason, I don't know why, but I knew the life that he was raised, and I said, you know, I really would like to know, I would love for him to understand what real love was, because I thought I showed him that. And I started praying about how I wanted him to know a father's love. And then I started praying about that it wasn't him. It was his brokenness, his sadness, his struggles, his raising up, all the imprints that was imprinted on him when he was little. It wasn't really him, it was just his fears. And then one day I just started praying for his salvation and praying for him God to transfer his heart and just make it pure, make it real. And one day I literally just went on the floor and I was bawling my eyes out, and I truly, in my core, felt that I said, I forgive him. And that's it.
The journey from wanting somebody to rot in hell, right, to really want him to have a new heart and to be forgiven and to be loved, and for you actually to love him is an amazing journey. Like, that's a God working in you kind of journey. But in order for you to get to that place, you had to be honest about like what was in you. And I think that's the place where sometimes we get stuck, because we think to ourselves, I don't even know if I can say this, or I'm not even in touch enough with these emotions to even know. I feel it. And so the journey for you of getting in touch with those feelings, speaking them in God's presence, has led you from a place where you were being really depressed and deformed to transformation where you actually have love towards this person, and their life has changed.
Yeah,
Correct?
that's the miracle. Some people know my complete testimony, but this person, he reaches out and he seeks to help others now. And this person understands that I've forgiven him, where he says he's not worthy of my forgiveness. I told him that there's somebody else that loves him. And now he gives testimony on God, and he blesses people, and he says, God bless you, and that wasn't him. So
Yeah.
I know through the prayer and everything, he didn't just transfer me and make me forgive, but he also allowed him to forgive himself.
Yeah.